What's up? Promised I would do a review on this knife. Gonna start doing reviews on budget knives. Budget does not mean bad, doesn't mean it's crappy. Budget just means it's affordable to everybody. And I think this knife would fit in that category. This is the CRKT Ken Onion Design Shenanigan. Does come in an aluminum version, which is this, and it also comes in a plastic version, polymer, whatever you want to call it. Not sure what the material is. It could be FRN, something similar to that, but that is cheaper than this. This knife is like $59, I think, on the internet, somewhere around there. Could be considered on the upper end of somebody's budget for knives. Especially if you're just one of those people that doesn't want to spend a lot of money on a knife, or one of those people that can't or is not willing to because they just don't want to buy anything over a certain amount because it's just a cutting tool. Some people may be just getting into knives and they're looking for affordable options to kind of get their feet wet. This is perfect. I guess you could call it a good EDC knife. I don't know what else you would use it for. It's not a hard use knife. It's not really, it doesn't really excel at anything, but it does everything really, really well. And what I mean by that is it doesn't do, it's not a hard use folder. It's not a super duper slicer. It's just kind of a meld of everything you could kind of want in a knife, and it's just a good all-around knife, especially for being $60. Honestly, if you would have handed me this knife and told me it was $80, I probably would have believed you. The only flaw with this knife that I found, really the only flaw, is the slightly off-center blade. If the blade was perfectly centered, then I would have believed this was a $90, $100 knife, honestly. And the blade isn't that far off-center. You can get it to move by pressing on the handle scale, and right there it's about centered, but you can't set the screws there because the screws are internal. This has a really weird construction, and I'll get to that, I think, later. As you can see, it's an aluminum. It's an aluminum knife, liner lock design. Give some size comparisons. It's a fairly large knife, just as big as a large Sebenza, almost as big as an SMF. So it has some size to it. It's not a huge knife, and it's definitely not heavy. Weighs just a tad more than a paramilitary too, I would say. I'll just talk about the outside of the knife right now. You have these aluminum scales, and then you have these rubber inserts that have this texture to them. They do provide traction. They're not so rubbery that sometimes some rubbery things it almost feels like you could rub the rubber off. Like you could just really rub at it hard and it would roll up some of the rubber and come off. This isn't like that. It's tactile, but it's not like grabby. The rubber itself isn't grabby. It's just the texture that's grabby. It does give a little tiny bit, but mainly it's just a nice soft surface to put your hands, and that surface is actually really grippy. These 3 screws are not structural. The sole purpose is just to hold this rubber insert on the knife. As you can see, it does conform to the knife pretty well. It will stick up in some spots like that, and if you're really anal retentive about it, you could take it off and super glue it down, but it's not that big of a deal. Pocket clip is nice. It's fairly low ride. Only about that much sticks out of your pocket, which isn't a whole lot. It is only right-handed tip down, so you have no options there. Although the pocket clip is good retention, very good retention actually, but it's not hard to get in and out of your pocket. There's jimping on the back of the knife here. It's really harshly cut jimping, and I found that it was kind of painful to flip this knife, so I had to change the way I flip it open, which I'll get to later. Torx screw construction, nice size pivot, easily adjustable. Overall, the overall appearance is honestly quite attractive to me. Open, as you can see, you have a nice recurve blade, which is also attractive to me. You have this nice black coating. It isn't as tough as DLC, but I would say it's very similar. I actually don't know what the coating is, but I did a lot of cutting with this knife, and as you can see, the blade coating is no worse for wear. There's actually no scratches on it, period. Just some little scuffs that could be cleaned off with your finger if you rubbed it. So the blade coating actually held up really well. You have, it's obviously recurved, like I said. You have this nice high hollow grind, which results in a very thin cutting edge. The knife cuts very, very well, and I'll get to that later. That's the model number, and obviously it's made by CRKT. You have this nice false edge up here. I'm not sure that would serve much of a purpose. Maybe it's a little bit of weight savings, but honestly to me it's just aesthetically pleasing. The blade is Acuto steel, and it's advertised to be at 6061 RC, I think. Could be 5960. Either way, I tested the steel. There's not much on the steel anywhere on the internet, so I decided to give it a thorough testing. And it holds its edge about like VG10. There is no appreciable difference between VG10 and this Acuto steel. It's actually very, very good. Extremely easy to touch up and hone back to sharpness, and it holds its sharpness for a good long while. You can watch my cutting test. I'll probably annotate them in right here when I get a chance. Obviously, you see it's a Ken Onion design. Just looking at it, you can see that it has a ton of Ken Onion influence. The action of the knife is very smooth, extremely smooth, as a matter of fact. It is riding on, I can't tell what kind of bearings these are. Give me just a minute. Looks to be phosphor bronze bushings. They're darker than any phosphor bronze bushings I've ever seen, so I don't know what they are exactly. But I have the pivot tightened down fairly tight, as tight as it'll go actually, and the blade still flips out extremely easily. It has a nice strong detent, as you can see. I'll push it down and the detent will take over. It's a very strong detent. Once you overcome the detent, the blade flies out with minimal effort. Very smooth. You have a nice smooth closing action. There's no point where it gets easier or harder to close the blade. It's just one continuous smooth action. I'm pleased to say there is absolutely zero blade play in this knife. This is more solid than a lot of $100, $200 knives. There is literally zero blade play in any direction, and I applaud CRKT for that, because honestly this is a budget knife, and most budget knives have copious amounts of blade play, save for like Spyderco Tenacious and Ontario Rat 1s. Most budget knives have an inordinate amount of blade play, and that's one reason I stay away from them. But this knife is solid as a rock. It's just as solid as something like a Sage 2. It's very solid. I know you can't feel it, but you have to take my word for it. It is a very solid knife. It is a liner lock, and let me bump the ISO up so you can see it. Lockup is at about 35%, which is where it was when I got it. It hasn't moved a bit, and I've really beat on this knife. Cut really hard with it, which a lot of times hard cutting force onto a surface can cause a lockup to go in further. It'll come later. The lockup didn't move at all. I can really give the blade a sling, and it's still right there at about 35%. Another telltale sign that a lock is going to wear fast is that you can push it in further with your finger. I can't push this in at all, and it does not stick at all when you close it. So that's honestly really good. That tells me that the liner lock is in spec. It mates with the blade tang really well, and it's probably not going to wear at all for many, many, many years. Steel liner locks don't wear all that much to begin with, so this thing should last almost indefinitely, especially with the early lockup it has. Yeah, the liner is kind of thin, but this isn't advertised as a hard use knife, and that liner is more than adequate to keep the blade from closing on your fingers. If you're doing anything that can cause that liner to fail, then you were abusing the knife, honestly, because it's extremely, extremely solid. So you're not going to get that liner to fail, period, under normal use. Overall, if you're looking for a cheaper knife, something you can buy and not worry about damaging when you use it, just get this. It's honestly a really, really, really good knife for $60. It would be a good knife for $80 in my opinion. I thought the steel was going to be CRKT's usual crap, but it's not, and the build quality is not CRKT's usual crap, and the lockup isn't CRKT's usual crap. So it has to be attributed to Ken Onion. That's the only thing I can think of, is that Ken Onion really made CRKT step it up with the manufacturing process on these knives. So I think I covered about everything. I do want to stress that the steel is great. You won't hear much about Acuto steel right now. Down the road we could, but it is every bit as good as Spyderco's VG10. And Spyderco is known for getting their heat treats down pat. So it's honestly a really, really good performing steel. Anyway, if there's a huge demand for these kind of reviews, the lower end knives, not so much lower end, just more affordable, then let me know and I can definitely do it. I'll be on the search for some of the highest quality and lowest cost knives there is, and I think I could do a good job at finding some of those. So anyway guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.